Welcome to today's webinar. We'll be starting in just a few minutes. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to today's webinar. We'll be getting started in just about 2 minutes. Okay, well, it's 1 o'clock. Thank you all for joining our webinar entitled Welcome to Is the FDA Changing Focus? This is Jeff Carbon. I'm the Director of Operations for Compliance Team, and I am filling in for our Director of Marketing, Val Hoffman, who was kind of ill this week. So I'm pleased to be guest hosting, and I just want to cover a couple of points before we get started. Please feel free to ask questions anytime during the webinar. There's a place to do it on the within the GoToWebinar console, and we will be answering all of those questions at the end. The webinar is expected to last about 40 minutes, and so it should give us plenty of time at the end of the webinar to cover all of your questions. Also, everybody that attends today will be getting a copy within no more than 2 days. So feel free to take notes, but rest assured that you will be getting a copy of the slides. With that said, I would like to go ahead and introduce Regina Fullen, our presenter for today. Regina is the Director of GXP Consulting for Compliance Team, and she assists all of our clients, but specifically clients in the medical device and pharma industries, and helps them achieve ever-increasing compliance to regulations in the pharma, medical device, and related industries. Within her role at CTI, she uses her writing skills to publish relevant and meaningful articles, similar to today's content, to help medical manufacturers stay current with regulatory changes, industry trends, and to also improve product quality. She's a certified quality engineer, a certified quality auditor, and also a certified manager of quality / organizational excellence with ASQ. With that said, Regina, please take it away. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff, and thank you very much for filling in for Val today. I would like to thank all of you for attending. I hope that we can make this a very useful session and that you have some information you can take back to work and apply directly to your job. With that said, what information are we going to be covering directly relevant to your job? Well, let's talk about our session objectives. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to overview the most current publicly available data on FDA 483 observations for both pharmaceuticals and medical device. Yes, there are other program areas, and we are excluding those from the scope because our main focus at compliance team are pharmaceutical and medical device manufacturers. And we'll do a comparative analysis of those 483 observations against what historically the 483 observations have been. That'll give you some insight on how the FDA's thinking has changed over time and what their compliance priorities are now versus what they've been in the past. And that should help you to identify some high priority compliance actions that you can take and do at your relative establishments and be able to get your quality program so that hopefully you've reduced your inspection risk. So let's get started and just get right into it. First thing we're going to start off is to discuss pharmaceuticals. And so you can see the way that this table is set up is that you have, the rank. We're doing like a top 10 David Letterman list, if anybody here remembers David Letterman, or am I dating myself? But a top 10 list. The citation, which is the actual place in the CFR where it's codified in the law, and then the description of what the violation is. And then on the far right, you'll see the frequency. So how many citations were issued for that particular CFR reference, and what were the total number of citations given in the 483s. And you can see that there were 3,730 pharmaceutical 483 findings total identified. So the first one, there's no written testing program to assess the stability. So stability testing, right? This one, and the reason why I have a star next to it, is that this is a new item in the top 10 over the time that I've been studying it. And interestingly enough, we know that there's a big buzz out there about data integrity, and this citation is new to the list and pertains directly to data integrity. So take that back as maybe a priority where the FDA may have changed. Then we have, this one has to do with sterile products, and that you do not that a lot of companies may not necessarily be establishing or writing or following procedures for ensuring sterility. Now, because this finding only applies to products that are labeled as sterile, you can think that the fact that it made it on the top 10 among that subset of sterile products, that this is pretty important to the FDA, because that means a lot of sterile producers might be out of compliance. Then the next one is validation and production process controls. And then we have lab testing, which kind of has a data integrity twist to it too, if you do not have good laboratory methods to keep your data safe. Sanitization of your equipment and utensils. So even if you don't have a sterile product, you still have to make sure it's clean. And then another production and process control related finding. So number 7 and number 4 both relate to production and process controls, although 7 also talks about the validation of such. So number 3, we don't have, or should I say, poor laboratory controls. Failure to review your discrepancies. So any failures or any out of specification, out of tolerance conditions not getting investigated, which actually kind of falls into the realm of CAPA on the device side, but a lot of pharma programs have CAPA programs that investigate these things too. And then number 1, the quality control unit is not in writing or fully followed. Now, I would say that in general, if a company doesn't know what it's doing, they have poor training, they're at risk of violating any of these. But most importantly is the quality control unit, whose job is to make sure that everything's getting done. So it's highly likely that the reason why the quality control unit finding is number 1 is because the FDA sees that there's no quality control unit. They found enough to basically say you have no quality at all, and that might be the only finding written on that 483. So you could see why that might be a high finding. Now, most companies do have a quality control unit, but there's probably gaps. So, you know, it's a good thing to reflect and see what's going on. As far as the data, the top 3 make up 17% of all the observations. So these top 3, and the top 10 make up 30% of the observations. Now, okay, maybe these top 10 only take up a third of what the FDA finds, because there's a lot of regulations in 210, 211. But again, this is the high impact items. And usually if you look at one of these, it'll lead you down the trail of training or some other area where you have a gap. So some general comments on the 210 to 11 findings. So one thing that's happened is in my study is that 211.22 about the not establishing a quality unit, that's been in the number 1 position for the last 6 years that I've been studying it. So, and this number 8, I think I already discussed before, is that it only applies to product that's purporting to be sterile, which means if you assume that maybe only a quarter of pharmaceutical products actually purport to be sterile, the fact that it's in the number 8 position is almost like a number 1 position among those types of products. And then the number 9 with the data integrity for computerized systems is a new one to the list and is a hot topic right now in the FDA. And while we don't see anything similar to it on the medical device side, which we will be getting into soon, I think that data integrity for medical devices is kind of in there along with the validation findings, but we'll take a look at that now. For devices, we have a tie for 9 and 10 for design control and design change. Interesting. The FDA must find design control to be pretty important. Then we have CAPA. Then we have quality audits not being established. And then control over product, again, production and process controls. Validation. Again, I think that this could have a data integrity element to it also. MDRs, and notice that this one is under 803, not under 820. 803 is frequently cited, and that is you have to have procedures for having written medical device reports anytime that there is a death or injury or a situation in which it could have caused a death or injury. That needs to be reported to the FDA. So for devices, because there's not quite so many citations, 30% of the observations are covered from 4 to 10. And if you go to the top 3, okay, so control over non-conforming product, and then complaint handling. Okay, so this is the 820 side of the complaint handling of the 803, and another CAPA. So CAPA and complaint handling have made the list twice. So we can kind of see that if CAPA and complaint handling were added to the list twice, then it's probably pretty important to the FDA. So these top 3 make up 22%, like we said, and the top 10 make up 52% of the observations. So if you're a medical device company, you're going to be addressing more than half of your risk for audit exposure by addressing just these top 10. So some comments. So the top 6 were in the same top 6 in 2018. So when we did a trend, and you'll see this trend later. So that top 6, those top 6 are extremely important. And 820.100A, which was in the #1 spot for CAPA, was there for at least the last 7 years, how long I've been studying it. And 820.198A for complaint handling was in there for at least the last 7 years as well, in the #2 spot. So while the requirements for device master record dropped off the list, we got design control procedures that took its place. So maybe, and I'm not going to say absolutely, but maybe the FDA is looking a little more closely at good design control. And I would guess that that has to do with the fact that creation of the device master record is a requirement for fulfilling all of your design control requirements. So I've gone into all those top 10s, and we're ready to take a little poll here. And so if you were inspected next week, how well do you feel your organization would perform against your top 10? So if you're a device manufacturer, the device top 10. If you're a pharma manufacturer, the pharma top 10. How do you think you would do? Now you could go according to how long it's been since you've been audited, when you feel that maybe, have you kept your eye on the ball on things, or have things kind of slid as a result of maybe personnel changes or whatever? Do you feel that there's a gap on this top 10? So go ahead and vote, and I'm going to give you, another. We got 46% of people have voted. The poll's been open for a minute. I'll give it another 30 seconds to make sure that everybody gets their votes in, because we only have 50% voted. Some of you might be in the medical device single audit program, and this question might be not as value added to you, because you wouldn't get a surprise, we're inspecting you next week notice, but there it is. Okay, I think we're ready to close the poll. 57% of you voted. 6% of you are very confident. 31% of you are confident, but not very confident. And then 50% of you are kind of so-so. Maybe there's some things here. Maybe your company's just starting to think about data integrity. And 13% of you fall in the concerned category. So that's an indicator that this webinar might be helpful to you to identify where those gaps are, and for you to do a gap assessment. So thank you for participating in that survey. I'm now going to proceed with going a little bit further on. So according to the title of, does the FDA actually have a new focus? Well, the way that I've kind of tried to answer this question is by the same things that we're supposed to be doing inside of our own companies. We're supposed to be trending things. And this is the pharma top 10 stuff. Okay, so this looks like a mess, but I will explain things to you. So the red arrow on the left shows that the 211.22 has been consistently in the #1 position for the whole time I've been studying it. So you are going to have a good quality control unit to be successful as a pharma company. If you do not have a good quality control unit, all bets are off, because that's what ensures that you have compliance to all the other regulations. So the FDA tends to put the most important finding as finding #1 in the 483, and I would not be surprised to see that this is the #1 thing cited, the first observation, because everything else is contingent on a quality control unit running the ship. Now, the two circles that I have that show a lot of crisscrosses. Those crisscrosses are showing that there were things that drastically changed their rank between 2016 and 2017, and then again from 2017 to 2018. And the interesting thing to note here is that in 2017, the FDA had a reorganization. And they were changing they called it program realignment. And I think during that period of time, things were in flux. And after the 2017-2018 flux, it seems like things have leveled out again. So has pharma focus changed over time? Maybe, but it looks like it's stabilized over time, and we always know that a quality control unit is important. So, so we have a period of new normal, because from 2017 to 2018, 2019, seems like we got to a new normal. And because of that, we can use a more risk-based prediction model for audit preparation. But we need to be mindful that data integrity is a new item that the FDA is now starting to look at. So everything that you focused on in the past is good, but you need to add that data integrity element. And I do have a paper online with a checklist of data integrity items that you can find on the compliance team website if you need to be, if you need to remind yourself of those types of things that would be important for a data integrity program. That being said, we are now going to move on to devices. Now, devices has the same mishmash in the 2016, 2017, 2018 timeframe. But the interesting thing here is that CAPA and complaint handling have been in #1 and #2 for the whole time that I've studied this. And if you look at 2018 and 2019, the arrows on the right, you will see that 2018 and 2019 had the same #1 and 2 for those 6. And the only little change is between 7 and 8, they flip-flopped. And then, of course, we have a new arrival, you know, for devices with design. But both of those that are in 9th and 10th place have to do with design history files. So for devices, we're seeing a lot of consistency. Any flux that we saw, again, we're in a new normal. Things are more predictable. We can apply a risk-based inspection preparation model here too. And I would add the same caveat for data integrity to devices, even though it wasn't specifically called The reason why is we have validation findings. A lot of devices are computer system run. The validation would apply to that as well. And design history files, very important there. That's part of your design, your computerized systems that are being used to produce your medical instruments. Those will also be called into question as part of your design. And so there we are. So we saw some normalization. And what was the root cause? Well, I already discussed this, the FDA change in organizational structure, this program realignment. Let me explain a little bit more about what happened in program realignment. So in 2018, the FDA undertook a huge training program to have the inspectors specialize in a specific program area. Like if you're a medical, you were either a medical device inspector or a pharma inspector or a food inspector, but you would never be an inspector that was jack of all trades. And before 2018, inspectors would specialize in something, but if there was a shortage of people who were dairy inspectors, they might send a device inspector out to a dairy plant. Now, they didn't know what they were looking for. They'd read the reg and go, well, I think this. Not anymore. And now the inspectors report through a management structure that will oversee their reports. And if an inspector's out in the field and has a question about something, they might call their boss and make sure that there's a consistent application of the findings across the program area, which is great because there's predictability. We'll see that predictability ourselves, but it also means they're getting smarter because they're really specialized and they understand your particular type of device or pharmaceutical product. Here's some other things that we want to kind of talk about. How are we being inspected? How is the industry being inspected? So the graph on the left is talking about the relative frequency of foreign inspections versus domestic inspections. And we can see that because more products are being imported, the rate of foreign inspections is going up while the rate of domestic inspections is going down. Now, does that mean that if you're a domestic company, don't be worried? I'm not going to say that. And the reason why is because the FDA does have some software that does some risk-based assessment of whether a company is operating in a perceived state of compliance, and therefore you can skip an inspection versus a perceived poor compliance, and that would expedite the inspection. So they're going according to risk. And so some of us feel that some foreign manufacturers may be a little more risky, so you can see why the inspection rate overseas is going up while the inspection rate domestically is going down. Now, on the right, we see just kind of a small graph, and this is just how many inspections have taken place just for drugs or devices. And I don't know why 2017 shows so many. Maybe that's part of the reason why there's the crisscross going on there. But generally, it looks like we're in the normal where, the normal is about 700 pharma inspections per year and about 900 or 1,000 device inspections per year. And I don't know what happened in 2017, but that could explain the crisscross. So we got some things here. And then the inspection risk that you have depends on the program area. So these are the three different classifications that a inspection receives. You get NAI, which means no action indicated, meaning you passed. They didn't find anything. OAI, which means official action indicated, and that means you failed big time. You had enough findings that potentially you could end up with a warning letter. And then you have the in-between, and that's VAI, which is voluntary action indicated. And that means the FDA found something, but you can take those corrective actions on your own. So you can see that, you know, biologics seems to actually have a lot of NAI and VAI, and there were no OAIs. So I'm not really concerned too much about giving you the biologics data. We can, when devices and drugs cover most of similar requirements, and they have a much higher rate of some kind of findings. Interestingly enough, is when we're talking about warning letters, now going to warning letters, because that's where your OAIs come from, are, you know, your warning letters come from OAIs. You can see that there's, you know, the number of warning letters by fiscal year, and it looks like, you know, it kind of is around 15,000 about. It's coming in around, but the rumor is that the FDA may be increasing the number of device companies that will get warning letters, meaning that maybe there were a lot of OAI 483s that did not get a warning letter that will get one if they were inspected this year. And the reason why was that they had some internal personnel issues where they didn't have enough people to write and review the warning letters. And so they also have a requirement that the warning letter needs to be done within a certain time period after issuing the 483, and they just didn't have enough people on hand to be able to write the warning letters within the required time frame. 2020 won't be the same. So just, you know, if you're trying to avoid a warning letter and you're a device company, you know, just want to be aware of that. So what does this mean to me? Okay, again, we can use this data as inputs to a risk-based inspection preparation model. That means you say, what's in my top 10? Those are the things I'm going to look at first. Next thing, okay, I've got to do my own quality audit. Maybe I'll find some other things, but you can rank those things of your internal quality audit as what's most important. Are they on the top 10 or not? And deal with those things first. And the idea of this whole thing of doing this trending exercise is that you're going to be learning from the past to inform what you're doing now. And so you can create some kind of prediction of what the FDA is likely to be inspecting when they come to visit you, and be able to have those documents ready, and so you can be prepared. Okay, there's a caveat here. We know the FDA is getting better at their job. This whole program realignment strategy, where they specialize now in your particular type of product, means that they are starting to be better at looking at records, looking at data, and being able to assess whether it meets the requirement or not. And they are also using risk-based tools. Before I said that they have a computer program that identifies the firms based on their likelihood of non-compliance, and those are the ones that they visit first. So if you aren't compliant, let's say you have a recall, let's say you have some kind of lawsuit that goes out, people are citing some kind of problems with your product, the FDA is going to put that in their computer system, and it'll pop out the database saying, let's go and inspect them. They also learn the complaints are a window to quality, and you need to have good training. So, you know, whether you have a good procedure, well, the proof is in the pudding. Do you have records that show that you're following that procedure? As good as it may be, if people aren't trained to that procedure and therefore aren't creating records that show that the procedure is being followed, that's going to be a problem too. And it does look like, because the FDA is specializing, especially if you're in devices, they are doing a lot of training and certification to review that whole design control issue and your complaints that feed into your medical device reports and your design master records. Or device master records. So they want to see that evidence. So, and then of course, overall emphasis on greater data integrity. So based on this, what would your action plan be for those people, of course, who are concerned about their quality system and how well they might do if they were asked to be audited next week? And the first thing I'm going to ask any company to do is they got to do a self-audit. Besides it being one of the top 10 that it's not getting done for device companies, it's a good way of being able to find out where your weak spots are. The next thing is you want to dig deep in complaints, design, data integrity. You want to make sure that your quality unit is functional. You want to make sure people are trained on things. They have a good design history, all that stuff. You want to open those investigations and CAPAs for the identified issues. And here's why. If the FDA comes in and they find that very issue that you found in your self-audit, you want to be able to say, you want to be able to have a story to explain, yes, we already know about this issue, and here's what we're doing about it. And here, look at our CAPA, our investigation, it's open still. We're still doing an investigation, or we're still working on the correction, but you can see that we are working toward fixing that. If they can see that you are using your system to address those problems that you self-identified, and that they didn't uncover anything that you didn't already know about, that is an indication to the FDA that your system is working, it's doing what's supposed to be doing. You are in the process of making a correction, and you're going to fix it. There's a commitment there. So that's why number 2 is very important for you to open those CAPAs and investigations. And then you want to make sure that that documentation is ready to present those actions. So if you have an open investigation in CAPA, you want to have it look very good, be up to date, be organized, be retrievable. And then I'm going to just add this one thing, is that if you don't know what that's supposed to look like, we can help. We can give you some kind of risk-based inspection prep solution. Either you can do the audit and we can help you figure out how to fix those things, or we can do the audit, find your top 10 issues, and help you address action plans for that. Because when we do the right thing, it never requires any subterfuge. It's just simple and direct. We comply because it's just simply the right thing to do. We know that. So next poll, we're opening up a new poll. Do you know now, based on what I've kind of given the data, what your organization needs to do based on the top 10 data and FDA trending? Hopefully the path is clear to you, or at least more clear to you. Looks like you got, we're voting. I'll give it again a minute, 30 seconds for you guys to vote. But if your organization has a clear action plan on how they're going to take care of things, now you're not going to be ready in 1 week for an inspection. I mean, I know how it is in companies. You got to notice that the FDA is going to be visiting in a couple weeks, and it's like, oh my gosh, let's go back and review everything we have and make sure everything is clean, and let's get all this organized so that we can just pull it out and give it to the inspector right away. We want everything inspection ready. we don't always exist in a constant state of inspection readiness, but we have an idea of where we need to be. Which means that it gets a little, you know, a little tense and stressful, and that happens. But if your organization knows what it needs to do, you have a path forward. Okay, we're ready to close the poll. We got 23% of people know what they need to do. 54% believe they have a really good idea of what they'd need to do, but they'd need a little more time to think. 15% of our poll respondents said that they have a feeling where they would need to, what they would need to do to get ready, but maybe might need a little helping hand. And too many variables involved. We got 8% of poll respondents there. We only got 57% voters, which is fine. But you know, we want to keep the cards close to the chest. But again, if you feel that you need some help in this area, we are here to try to help your organization identify its actions that need to be taken. So in summary, I think that we can use that top 10 list of the 483s that give you a view on what the FDA is currently thinking. And especially if you take that over time, and you can also look at the top 10 483s and figure out how well the industry is complying. That quality unit, you know, is the quality unit actually doing its job? Well, it looks like the quality unit has been a thorn in the side for a regulated industry for as long as it can be, and CAPA and complaints. So we're not getting better, it seems like, because FDA is still finding these same things. So we saw this shift in 2018, and it seemed like it got stable again in 2019 based on that program realignment. And you can go and look inside the FDA data and find out how your particular company, based on its industry, your program area, how your inspection may go. And so based on that, you can take that data, compare it to what you have internally, and make a risk-based plan to address your most difficult, problematic audit risks first, and get those things in writing in your CAPA and investigation system so that you can prove that you're really giving those matters a high priority. So now we're at the question and answer portion of this presentation. And I'd like to be able to answer some questions. Are there any questions out there?
If attendees could type in questions, Regina would be happy to answer them.
Yeah. Or I can also try, let me see, we can maybe try to open up the speakers for all of the attendees. I'm gonna unmute everybody so that people can ask their questions. It looks like we have some people. Any questions? Doesn't look like it's unmuting anybody. So just type your questions in the question bar. Okay, looks like we have one question.
Okay.
Do inspectors seem to give more 483s? Do new inspectors seem to give more 483s than seasoned inspectors? I'm going to, okay, so I can speak to this on very anecdotal evidence. Okay, I don't think that and what I'm going to say is not scientific at all. The first thing is that theoretically all inspectors should be giving the same kind of inspection, no matter if you are a seasoned inspector or not. So they're trained, that everything is uniform. After that program alignment, everybody's supposed to be doing everything the same way, and it's supposed to be reviewed by a manager who looks at the audit evidence and should reach the same conclusion no matter who the inspector is. Prior to 2017, my anecdotal evidence told me that there was some inspectors that wanted to get through the inspection more quickly and might have, if they were there for a long period of time, may have said, I'm not going to go into detail in this. And but that was prior to 2017. It was a guy who was about to retire. Maybe he didn't care as much. So I would not use that as a as a data point. Yes, I would think that younger inspectors might want to prove themselves more with their organization, but again, it's all supposed to be uniform. So I really can't speak to that type of thing scientifically. So then what's the typical length of a normal inspection? The person who wrote this said that they used to get inspections for 1 to 2 days, and then it started getting 5 days long and scheduled from the start of the inspection. Okay, so a 1 to 2 day inspection is an inspection that's generally done like to survey things, like, it would be done for, they think that you're typically compliant, but it's your turn came up. You're viewed as a low risk, and they're going to just verify that you're still low risk. But if the FDA has reason to believe that there's something there, they might schedule a 5-day inspection. So examples are warning letter follow-up. If you've closed out a warning letter recently and you seem to be doing well, but the FDA wants to see how have you sustained that, they might schedule a 5-day inspection to make sure that everything that you committed to is corrected and that no new things have fallen out of compliance during the time that you corrected the specific items in your warning letter. But yeah, 2 days is a typical inspection, but it'll go longer if the FDA thinks that there's a reason to dig. And of course, if you go longer than a week, the FDA is on a mission. Okay, the major difference between a pre-approval inspection and a general inspection. Okay, so a pre-approval inspection, that put PAI, but pre-approval inspection. So a pre-approval inspection is focused on whether your company is ready for selling the product that you have applied for. You usually have some kind of a regulatory submission that you've brought into, submitted to the FDA, and the FDA isn't going to license your product until you've passed the pre-approval inspection, saying that you have the quality program that's adequate for fulfilling all of the requirements that you put into your licensing application. So they will cover the general quality system elements that are required in the CFR. And they may also get focused on some of the data that is supporting your application. So it's a little bit deeper, but it's specifically deeper in that particular product application that you have.
Regina, there are a few questions that came in that seems like you may have skipped over.
Okay, please.
Want to scroll up, or I can read them too.
Okay, yeah, if you read them to me, yeah, that'd be helpful.
Okay, so the next one says, is there any indication from the products purported to be sterile being dragged further back in the process? For example, citing for lack of smoke studies for DS final filtration?
Yes, absolutely. So so there's a certain number of requirements that are in an FDA guidance for design of the clean rooms for the products purporting to be sterile, and those designs need to be validated, just like your HVAC system and the filter integrity of your HEPAs and your smoke studies, making sure that you're not getting any infiltration of dirty air into your clean area. All of those things are part of that larger system of making sure that there's controls in place to ensure that your product is sterile when you actually put sterile on your label.
Right, but that's for the drug product. This is drug substance, and I've seen people being cited recently, I think, for showing that, well, you're in your drug substance plant, your API plant, you filtered it through a bioburden reducing filter into a carboy, and you ship it to your drug product plant. You don't have any smoke studies in your drug substance plant. We're applying the 2004 Annex 2004 guidance, or Annex 1. You're not claiming sterility of the drug substance, and yet they're applying it.
Well, that's an interesting finding, and so they're saying because the final product purports to be sterile, that the drug substance, the API, also needs to be sterile. That's
what it seems like, and I was just wondering if you're seeing that anywhere else.
I really haven't seen it elsewhere. It's interesting that you mentioned that, because we do have a client who is an API producer, who would have to possibly explain some of that stuff. But yeah, I guess if you have a sterile filtration, terminal filtration with a 0.2 micron, maybe they're thinking, then what are you doing to make sure that the air doesn't, incur anything? It's a good question, and possibly, maybe it was because there wasn't a validation for that, or something like that, that it was found. And it's possible that they would just want you to have a very good 483 response to explain why you took that strategy, and if there was a documented, something that didn't come up in the inspection. Because sometimes, at least from my perspective, when you're there in the front room presenting your audit information, some of the records and documentation that maybe would have absolved you of that finding, you didn't think to pull while you were there, and maybe that's an example of that.
Okay. Next question. Any feedback for FDA and supplier evaluation?
Well, yeah, I have seen a number of supplier centric 483s out there. Obviously, it didn't make the top 10, but the FDA does require, especially on the device side, that you have a very good supplier quality program. You need to have some kind of risk-based evaluation of your suppliers based on the risk to the product, the product risk itself, the supplier history, those types of things. And so it is a requirement both on the pharma side and the device side that you have a supplier evaluation program. But like I said, it didn't make it in the top 10, but it would certainly be a risk, and there should be some kind of documentation backing that up, and I have seen 483s for it.
Okay. The next question I think you may have just answered, but I'm going to read it. I was surprised to see that supplier controls did not make the top 10. I thought I had heard that this was an emerging issue. Any comments?
It might be an emerging issue in 2020, but it hadn't made it in the past in 2019. So that could be an issue that's coming up, kind of like how we saw a lag where people really started talking about data integrity in 2018, but we didn't really see it in the top 10 until 2019. This might be something that we'll see in the 2020 data.
Thank you. That seems to be all the questions that we've gotten.
Okay. Well, I want to thank all of you for your time. I appreciate your participation in this webinar. I believe that there's going to be a survey coming out afterwards. We would love to hear your comments. And I do this webinar every year, where I just keep on adding the next year's data. So if you have any suggestions on how we can improve this information, make it more useful to all of you, I would very much appreciate it. And I look forward to your comments, and have a wonderful afternoon.